Morning. We're going to start. We're going to start now. This is the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole regarding bills number 190152, 190153, 190154, and resolution number 190164. Mr. Stitt, please read the titles of the bills and resolution.
Bill number 190152, in ordinance to adopt the capital program for the 6 fiscal years 2020 through 2025 inclusive. Bill number 190153, in ordinance to adopt the fiscal 2020 capital budget. Bill number 190154, in ordinance adopting the operating budget for fiscal year 2020. Resolution number 190164, resolution providing for the approval by the Council of the City of Philadelphia of a revised 5-year financial plan for the City of Philadelphia covering fiscal years 2020 through 2024 and incorporating proposed changes with respect to fiscal year 2019, which is to be submitted by the Mayor to the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority, the authority pursuant to the Intergovernmental Cooperation Agreement, authorized by an ordinance of this Council, approved by the Mayor on January 3, 1992, Bill number 1563-A, by and between the City and the authority.
Thank you, Mr. Stitt. Today we continue the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole to consider the bills read by the clerk that constitute proposed operating and capital spending measures for fiscal year 2020, a capital program, and a forward-looking capital plan for fiscal 2020 through fiscal 2025. Today we will hear testimony from the following city departments: Commerce and OEO, Public Property and Fleet Management. The first person to testify is
Harold Epps.
Mr. Epps and his team.
Good morning, President Clark.
Morning.
How are you, sir?
Great.
One must be smart to never go anywhere without the team. Good morning, President Clark and members of City Council. I am Harold T. Epps, Director of Commerce. Joining me today are Sylvie Gallier-Howard, First Deputy Commerce Director, and Al Harper, Deputy Commerce Director for Economic Opportunity. Also present are many other Deputy Directors and members of the Commerce team, and I am proud to provide testimony on Commerce's fiscal year 2020 operating budget. Having learned from the past, I'm only going to summarize the testimony that you all have in front of you.
Thank you.
And so the last 3 years, I've had the privilege of leading Commerce Department through a period of prosperity and growth that has allowed me to attend many grand openings and commemorate many milestones that will contribute to the city's long-term growth. Over the last year, there have been many new businesses that have opened, including Amicus, a New Jersey life sciences company that has chosen Philadelphia for its second office. Intercom, one of the country's 2 largest radio broadcasters, chose to relocate from the suburbs to Philadelphia. Many other companies have followed that same path. Grubhub, a rapidly growing publicly traded food order company that established Philadelphia as its corporate headquarters with 100 new jobs. And many other businesses that have expanded their footprint into Philadelphia, such as Wuxi Aptech, Sainsbury's, and of course Comcast and their magnificent second tower. On the other side of the coin, we have made over the last 12 months 20 quarter visits that have allowed us to interact with a lot of small companies, small businesses in all parts of the city. And over my tenure, that now totals over 60 neighborhood and quarter visits that we've made. That's just a sampling of the activity we've been involved in. Though government does not make jobs, we just help facilitate it. We're proud of the fact that over the last 3 years, Philadelphia has outgrown the national average in job growth, and that's the first time that's happened in almost everybody's lifetime that's in this room. Just a snapshot of the work that we have been focused on and will continue to focus on over the next 12 months would include neighborhood quarters. We will continue to make those visits, which will provide us many opportunities to support our small businesses. We have an additional focus on elevating Philadelphia's brand that will allow us to further tell the story of Philadelphia, that will put us in even a better position to continue to attract and retain businesses to Philadelphia. That will also allow us to be smart about making significant investments in the city's talent pipeline. A lot of work is being done there. And all of this also will drive our ability to make Philadelphia a lot easier to do business with. So that being said, I'm especially proud of the team that Commerce has and that we're charged to do the work on behalf of the city. And I want to thank City Council for working closely with us to push forward these important changes and improvements to further the momentum that are experiencing and to ensure a better Philadelphia for all. So that's a quick summary of what we've been involved in. We're here to answer any questions that will come before us. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Got a couple of scripted questions, but I want to ask you about something that's been discussed for, I guess, basically decades, particularly in the city of Philadelphia. Given our poverty rate, it is clear that there are a number of components that relate to poverty and the challenges that keep people in poverty and have people that are teetering around poverty. A slippage one way or another could go in a particular direction. As you know, we recently, City Council had a press conference to talk about its Narrowing the Gap initiative. Again, shameless plug. I'm sure you've seen a copy of this. Actually did that on TV Sunday. I was on there with Councilwoman Kiona Sanchez. Shameless plug, but it was a really significant debate to discuss these issues. The Chamber of Commerce at a recent, and I believe, Mr. Epps, you were there, at a recent City Council reception, they talked about their new initiative to address poverty. Philadelphia's delegation, and I want to thank them, and the state rolled out an initiative that in large part talked about poverty. So everybody's kind of getting on the same page and with hopefully an actionable plan, because we have been discussing this forever, and at the end of the day, we continue. Actually, I'm hearing since the 70s, been either at or near the top of the largest municipalities as it relates to poverty rate, which is something that we prefer not to have as a designation. Can you tell me, and I know that the administration has been working on this in a number of ways, not only this administration, but prior administration acknowledging. I understand that there was a discussion about having a stronger fiscal position, and as a result of that, possibly making investments to deal with this. So can you kind of tell me, as we move ahead, what the strategy is in your department, since you're given the task of facilitating, maybe even creating in some sense, jobs/opportunities. Can you talk to me about what your department's short-term and long-term goals are as it relates to that?
Sure, and let me just start by saying, having been on both sides of the ledger over the last half decade, both the private sector and now 3 years in the public sector, I would first like to remind us that, yes, we still lead the nation of cities over 1 million people at a poverty rate, but the poverty rate, maybe we all don't appreciate, is still down 2.5 points from its peak. The peak was in 2011 at about 28%. We're down to 26%. So going in the right direction, we need to go faster.
Yeah, but isn't that, not to cut you off, isn't that based on more people moving in that are not in poverty? I think it has, that reduction has more to do with people moving into the city that are above the poverty rate, as opposed to the people that are currently in poverty being reduced. So that designation... That
is not what our data says. The data says that at the same time in 2011, there were 415,000 people in poverty. Right now it's 390,000. So 25,000 people less. So I'm only going by the data.
I understand.
I think we all would say we still have a challenge, and we are working on that challenge. So for commerce, we start by, we need to have an environment that is open to business to create jobs, because jobs is the fastest way out of poverty. And I should say, a job that pays a living wage. So I want to applaud City Council, the administration, and everybody else that's trying to lift the wages such that people who go to work every day are not still in poverty. We still have a lot of challenge there because a lot of our jobs are service jobs, and they are still at the impoverished level. So we got some work to do. In fact, I was in Harrisburg yesterday. One of the things we all need to be working on is trying to get the state to send the signal that the minimum wage needs to be higher. So we've got to make sure that people have a job, but that job also pays a living wage such that they're not in poverty. So we'll continue to focus on providing an opportunity, an environment, and a backdrop that makes us business friendly, to have the appropriate set of guidelines and policies that attract business to Philadelphia and yet retain the ones we have. A lot of our work, we meet with all the council people 2 or 3 times a year to talk about the work in the neighborhoods that will provide the attractiveness of our jobs to flow out into the quarters and to our small businesses. And so a lot of the work that you all have helped support around Power Up, 10 KSB, a lot of the technical assistance work that we do provides the ability for entrepreneurs to get the skills they need to grow their businesses so that they can grow jobs. The Workforce Development Office has a dual reporting relationship to me and other parts of the administration, and a lot of that work is trying to raise the skill set of our birth citizens such that they can take advantage of the jobs that are coming. We still have a major gap between the knowledge economy that the world is demanding, and in fact the jobs are demanding, and some of the skills that we do or do not have. So a lot of work is going into raising that skill set through the Workforce Development Office. So that's just a list of some of the things we're doing immediately. At the end of the day, my headline would be, we've got to raise the educational level. That's a long-term issue. Because at the same time, when we lead the nation at a poverty rate, we also have one of the lowest 2- and 4-year degree attainment rates of our birth citizens. So a long-term path for Philadelphia is we got to make our workforce and our population more competitive for the jobs that are commanded today and tomorrow. Entrepreneurship is the other way that I summarize as your commerce director that gets people out of poverty, and that is to have them have the skill set to be able to run a business that will support their family and then grow beyond that. So a lot of work around education, a lot of work around entrepreneurships. But I will say to you that this is a long-term challenge. And on the other side of the coin, virtually all cities in America have poverty rates above 20%. So yes, we're at 26. And one of the goals that we do have before this administration is over, we hope, is to watch those numbers continue to fall. And I believe with the work we're doing, they will fall, but they will fall gradually.
Right. So what would you say is the most significant sustainable job growth in the city of Philadelphia?
Significant job growth area? Sustainable
yeah.
Job growth area?
Yeah. What industry?
So all the data says it has been and will continue to be meds and eds. They make up a third of our jobs, and that's given the aging of our population and given the number of hospitals and universities that we have, and they continue to grow, and they are anchors of employment in the city. The industry that is there today that's likely to continue will be meds and eds. Hospitality, we know right within the 5-block radius right now, we're probably building 6 new hotels.
So let me not to cut you off. So on the edge of meds, and I mean, I think we all know the answer to that
Yep.
question. I just wanted to put it on the record. What directly are we doing to close that skills gap? Because, you hear the national numbers, job creation, every Thursday, I believe, they come out. And then once a month, they talk about the monthly numbers, and the assumption is that Philadelphia is in that mix of job creation. What are we doing directly to close the skills gap for those jobs that are being created out in the University of Penn, Drexel, Hahnemann, all those healthcare job opportunities? What are we focusing on that in terms of adult education, short term, or are we focusing and I should be asking, I'll obviously ask this question when the school district comes here about those 10th, 11th, and those high schoolers in preparation for secondary educational opportunities to take advantage of the job growth, because unfortunately people are always going to be sick, and the fact we have an infrastructure that's inclusive of so many institutions relating around healthcare, there's going to always be job opportunities there. So can you tell me directly, what are we doing to close that skills gap to make sure that our folks get an opportunity in that sustain job growth industry.
I'm going to give the very headlines. I'm going to pass to Mike to my right. So the bottom line is one of the things that this administration did to build the collaboration was appoint to the Community College Board of Directors, Board of Trustees, myself, and Sheila Ireland for tighter coupling to ensure that the Workforce Development Office, which she leads, is tightly coupled with the City College of Philadelphia. And through that collaboration, a lot of focus, intentionality work is taking place to get that skills gap, and I'll let Ms. Ireland speak to that.
Morning.
Good morning. Sheila Ireland, Executive Director of the Office of Workforce Development. So there are a number of strategies being employed across this continuum we like to call the power of partnership. So I wish I had our report so I could flag it for you as well.
You gotta bring the shameless plug. I mean,
shameless plug, right?
You know what I mean?
But I think to speak to your question specifically, that report is entitled The Power of Partnership because it talks about, perhaps for the first time in Philadelphia's history, intentionally having major institutions play well together. So, for example, the school district is part of our partnership that talks about building opportunities for opportunity youth, putting work-based learning experiences into the classrooms for high school and middle schoolers so they understand how to effectively connect to work when they graduate from school or make choices that are very supportive of the careers that they're making. It's the opportunity to work with Philadelphia Works to build apprenticeship programs and to bring the PA Smart Grant money that came to Philadelphia to build apprenticeships across the board so people have the opportunity at little to no cost to actually engage in earn and learn opportunities so that they can become part of these industries that we're talking about.
Let me also add, the other strategy is to have consistency of oversight. So in addition to the two of us serving on the Community College Board, we also serve on the Philadelphia Works Board. And again, that's intentional, trying to get as much alignment and seamless communication between entities that will drive the strategy of workforce because we recognize its criticality to today and the future of Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm. And to Harold's point very specifically, I think it is about that, finally having this synergy, right? Because we work towards this problem for decades, as you noted, in silos, right? One entity does something, we're all trying to fight the same war, but we haven't necessarily come together around it. So I think for the first time, you're seeing us work together intentionally, not just across large organizations, but across departments. For instance, you see the Office of Workforce and everything from roadmaps to safer communities, to inclusive growth for commerce. We just featured a conference for the future of work here in City Hall 2 weeks ago. We're working across and in a number of different ways to really bring that synergy, I think, that will help support the outcome you're looking for.
Okay. All right. I got a significant number of follow-up questions, but I'm over my allotted time. So, thank you. I'm calling my colleague, Councilwoman Reynolds Brown.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, first of all.
Good morning.
For the first round of questioning, I'm going to share a few questions provided by Councilwoman Sanchez, and I'll get to my line of questioning after the next round. So I need to say thank you for always offering council members the opportunity to tour corridors. My office participated last year in joining you on a number of those corridors, and Councilwoman Sanchez's questions are focused on corridors. And so here they are. How many corridors are recognized by the City of Philadelphia?
How many corridors are recognized by the City of Philadelphia? The lady who can answer that is Ms. Karen Fegley. I will pass the mic.
State your name again for me.
Sure. Good morning. Karen Fegley, Deputy Commerce Director.
Okay.
So we follow the Planning Commission, their survey of the city, and they identify close to 300 commercial corridors in the city. Now, typically, when we're talking about our commercial corridor strategies and programs that we work with council on and then we try to implement, we're looking at around 80 that we identify as neighborhood, pedestrian transit-oriented corridors that are sort of densely occupied, around like probably 80-plus businesses on a few block stretch.
Wow.
So those are the ones that we focus our work on.
How many of those corridors receive funding from the city of Philadelphia? And my own separate question is, what criteria do you use to decide what corridors get lucky for a particular fiscal year in terms of funding?
So we try to hit them with as many different incentives or tools in our toolbox as we can. The program that has the broadest reach right now is the CDC tax credit program, which isn't specifically a corridor program, but it's a program that provides funding to CDCs who do economic development work in our neighborhoods. And so there's 40 organizations benefiting from that currently.
Currently?
Yes.
Wow.
And then we are going to add another group of CDCs who will benefit from a new program called the CDC Economic Development Support Grant, which was driven through council legislation last year to add another $500,000 in funding to organizations that don't get to take advantage of the tax credit program.
But currently, the CDC tax credit is federally funded, correct?
No, that's a city program that allows businesses make contributions to a CDC, and in exchange, the city provides a tax credit to those businesses. But I think what you're probably talking more about is our process, our RFP process, where we fund organizations for corridor managers or corridor cleaning.
But
Those are sort of our...
Before we get to that, there's some incremental questions here that I think we need to put on the record.
Okay, sure.
So, separate from that, I visited a couple of businesses who want to benefit from now what I know to be the CDC tax credit, but they do not sit on the corridors, on one of the 80 neighborhood corridors, or one of the 40 CDCs currently being funded. So how can they benefit and get in the loop of these kind of opportunities? Both of them are minority-owned women business. Well, that's redundant. Women-owned, African-American women-owned businesses.
So these are businesses that want to know how they can tap into different incentives.
For this particular effort, yes.
Right. Well, again, and that program is money that goes to a community development corporation, which then allows them to have staff to work with people. It's not money for the businesses directly. What we generally, we support, as the Commerce Department, we support every business in the city. That's our job, is to try to help every business. That doesn't always mean we can provide dollars. What we do is we provide one-on-one assistance through our business services team, and we connect them.
Stop right there. I'm aware of all of that.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Because this is an area that I've cared about for a mighty long time. So I don't want to use the time about what you do.
Okay.
Where there is concern and unhappiness is the lack of follow-through with bureaucrats who, when these women business owners call in, they're left hanging, and weeks go by before there's a return to pick up with where they left off.
Okay.
So how do you monitor to ensure that there's the follow-through for minority business owners who want to own a business, run a business, so they can feed their families and put people to work?
No, that's unacceptable for businesses not to get the answers they need.
So what kind of recourse do businesses have then? Is there any?
I don't know what particular recourse they can. We have Commerce has a hotline, has a business services number, 215-683-2100. So businesses can call that anytime. It's not manned 24/7, but they will always get a response to that. And so if a business is having an issue with any department, including with the Commerce Department, they can always respond again.
And that number again is what for the record?
215-683-2100. We also have just a general email, business@phila.gov, so that, again, any business, anytime they have a question, can reach out to us, and our job is to connect them and make sure they get the answers they need.
So, Councilwoman, one of the things that we are working on, it's not yet finished. We're trying to figure out, quite frankly, what the small business, what the business bill of rights should be. What should people expect from us? That is work that's in progress but not yet complete.
Do you still have the division of Department in Commerce that is in the business of wrapping their arms around small businesses and sort of holding their hand? It was initially staffed by Dr. Gregory. Is that department still
Yep,
there?
absolutely. That's our Office of Business Services, yeah. And that's under my purview.
Okay.
And Nazira Sabri directs the 10 business service managers. They're assigned geographically around the city, and they're the ones that are our first line of response for any business with any question.
And that is separate from the technical assistance you provide to agencies that have been the businesses that are benefiting from the CDC tax credit to the 40 CDCs currently enjoying that fund, correct?
Yeah, oh
Separate
yeah,
from.
absolutely. It's a separate thing. And in addition, we provide funding to Commerce directly uses our federal CDBG funds. We provide funding to nonprofit organizations that offer technical assistance and training and access to capital for businesses. So places like Entrepreneur Works, PIDC, Finanta, the Enterprise Center, organizations like that, we provide funding to so that we can direct businesses and match them up with the help they need.
Okay, the bell has rung. On the next round, I'd be curious to know what do those efforts yield in terms of actually creating and supporting minority and women-owned businesses. It's one thing to provide the service, it's another to see what the yield is, because that informs how well you're doing or not.
Absolutely.
So I'd be curious to know what the yield is of those efforts.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning to each of you. Karen, I'm going to focus my line of questioning around commercial quarters as well. Neighborhood stabilization and preservation has been a key concern, I think, of all council members since I've been here. And commercial corridor stabilization and preservation, you can't talk about neighborhood stabilization without looking at and thinking about the health of our commercial corridors. And my staff has spent a great deal of time on working on our corridors, and the success that we've been able to have would not be possible without working in tandem with your team. So if you all had gotten it wrong, I would be here right now letting you know 1,000% how I feel that you had not been responsive. But in this instance, in the 9th District, we worked well together, and I want to say a special thank you to Karen, to Yvonne Boyd, Celine Wilson, Michelle Price, Dennis Murphy, Natalie Jackson. She helped us with our study, Nazira Sabri, along with Ting Wang, and I hope I pronounced her name correctly, but she has helped us when we needed a translator for many of the business owners on the corridor, because language is sometimes the greatest divider, in us having to do the hard work of getting to each business, letting them know what services are available, and then strongly encouraging them to participate. So I wanted to say thank you there. Now I want to talk about commercial corridor cleaning. And I know some of my questions are related to the Streets Department, but they're also related to Commerce. Now, you mentioned in response to Councilwoman Reynolds Brown, 300 commercial corridors overall, but 80 identified as sort of neighborhood pedestrian corridors. Tell me how many commercial corridors currently get year-round street cleaning. There was an article that was written in Plan Philly that said that technically there were 8 year-round street cleaning routes. So I wanted to know, is that in line with what Commerce knows?
No, that's a streets question. I can try to find out for you, but that's in addition to the sidewalk cleaning program that we do.
So that's in addition to the sidewalk cleaning. So how often does Commerce work with the Streets Department relative to street cleaning?
We talk to streets all the time, as you know, because your staff is doing it too. And we are definitely going to coordinate on this new street cleaning pilot to make sure that the pilot areas that include corridors that we're coordinating. From what I understand, I think the plans for the street cleaning pilot is it will be a once a week thing, so it will complement, but it won't take the place of any sidewalk sweeping we're doing. I mean, hopefully it will be great in the residential areas. In the commercial areas, they still are going to need that daily at least once daily kind of sweeping, yeah.
So, and the reason why I start there is because I know the 5-year plan proposes additional funding of $250,000 annually for the Commerce Department to increase cleaning on commercial corridors. But for me, $250,000 is like a half of a penny to address the needs for commercial corridor cleaning in the city of Philadelphia. And so with that in mind, when I think about what an additional $250,000 annually will get us, like how many more commercial corridors can you clean with a half a penny that $250,000 an investment in this area means? Can you quantify it? $250,000 is equal to how many more corridors?
Yeah, this current year, as of right, in FY19, we're funding 26 corridors to clean with about $850,000. So the grants range from like 25 to 60 maybe, depending on the size of the area and the amount of trash. The additional funds, actually, because it is an additional 250 added to the line item, which is a good thing, but because last year we actually went above our line item, we used some money from some other places. So last year we spent 850. This year in FY20 we'll have 900. So it's really we're only going to probably be able to add one group, or maybe just increase everyone's amount by a little bit.
Right. So in essence, that additional $250,000 does not mean that we're going to be able to add 15 more corridors that are currently not included in the program.
No.
Okay,
So-
that's it. My question to you is, if there was an additional $2 million included in this program, would you be able to quantify how many more corridors in the city of Philadelphia would be able to be cleaned if there was an additional $2 million?
Yeah, absolutely.
And-
We have proposals right now, because we do this, we select these groups by RFP. So we're reviewing proposals right now. We receive proposals from 33 organizations to do cleaning on more than 33 corridors, because some of them represent multiple corridors. And we've asked them all to give us like their full, the Cadillac package, like include, just so we know, what would it really take for their corridors to be clean, to get a litter rating of 1, which means little to no trash, and include uniforms, and include making sure the bags are picked up and disposed of, and include the living wage rates as they go up too. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to say right here, but
you don't have to give us that number now, but I am formally requesting on the record that if there were an additional $2 million, if you could
What would we
forward
do?
back to council specifically identified for commercial corridor cleaning, what would that mean for the city of Philadelphia?
Okay.
And the reason why I am sort of stuck here, it is because my office here in this building, I look out towards the JFK, the Sovereign Bank side, and I'm looking and I'm watching people drop trash. I'm watching people drop trash there, but then I am watching a uniform cleaner who does not work for the city of Philadelphia, but apparently is employed through the Center City district, and whose primary responsibility is to ensure that Center City is clean. And immediately after I saw that, I went to a meeting in the district, and I said to our constituents, don't think that people who are operating, living, or doing anything in a more affluent area in the city, that they are any cleaner than the people
Right.
who are in our area. The reason why those commercial corridors are more aesthetically appealing as it relates to trash is because it is someone's job to make sure that they are literally walking down the street and picking up trash. And so with that being said, it's kind of like what I feel when we would talk about endowments, and I think about the big institutions, and then I think about my little old Lincoln, and us not being able to do what some of the other mainstream institutions, the investments that they were making. All commercial corridors and communities don't have the economic prowess to establish bids, where an additional tax is collected that is specifically, directed and utilized in that area to clean. In addition to that, Mr. President, I want to note that I was in Newark last year for a meeting, and I'm right down the street from City Hall, and I am parked in front of Whole Foods in Newark, and I am watching that same uniform cleaner whose responsibility it is to clean downtown Newark. And I am saying to myself, if Newark is getting it right and they are making an investment, and Center City has the economic prowess because it's the heart of the business community, what is it that we here in the city of Philadelphia, what can we do to ensure that our commercial corridors are clean? And in addition to that, from a workforce development perspective, I'm thinking about the people who could be doing the cleaning. And the reason why this makes good economic sense, Mr. President, is because we're not talking about adding people, new employees to the city's payroll, but these are independent nonprofit organizations who we could be funding, who could be employing people who live in our neighborhoods to clean those corridors. And so I want to make it, a mission to ensure that this department receives more funding in the area of commercial corridor cleaning, and that it is distributed equitably throughout the city of Philadelphia, because I heard you mention, and it's a sore spot for me, you started mentioning the community development block grant funding, and I'm thinking about where those dollars are spent, and they're not spent, the majority of them, anywhere near.
Our cleaning money is general funds, so we don't have those limitations. We make sure the cleaning money goes where it's needed, yeah.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, and Mr. President, whatever we can do as a council to work on that issue to ensure that commercial corridor cleaning in all neighborhoods across the city of Philadelphia are a priority. I'm willing to work with everybody in order to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Dunn.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning.
Morning.
A couple of budget questions. In your budget, you note an increase of 30 positions in Class 100 that came over from PIDC, I believe, in
Correct.
November. And I'm just curious, what was the reason for these positions to be brought under Commerce? What was the thinking?
The basic reason was for parity and equity among the staff. So historically, I believe for charter reasons, people employed into Commerce were put on the PIDC payroll, but over time, their benefit package and their compensation went one way. Ours was consistent with the city. We thought the gap was getting too wide and that people deserved equal, if you would, equal pay and equal compensation for equal work.
Okay. And then I have a question on the in-store forgivable loan program. I wonder if somebody could just give us a 30 or 40-second overview of how that works. I'm not sure everybody knows how that works.
Well, I could give an overview, but she can give the detail.
Hello. The in-store forgivable loan is we created it as a business attraction tool for our low-income corridors that have trouble seeing private investment without sort of some extra incentive. So it's up to $50,000 for a new or expanding business to use towards equipment and fit-out costs. It is a loan, so it's a pretty extensive paperwork process, and it settles as a loan at PIDC, but no payments are required. The loan is forgiven by the business or the property providing goods and services to the community for a 5-year period.
Oh, that's great. And
So let me just say to you that what I've learned in the 3 years is we have to be more strategic, more proactive, and more intentional to get resources to our neighborhoods and our quarters. And these programs, I want to applaud the creators because they are some of the mechanisms that help to provide the opportunity for people to get up and running and sustain their business in the neighborhoods. Fundamentally, we do it to a much grander scale in the center city part of the city, but these are some of the tools that are in their box to make sure that opportunity is provided to our small businesses in our neighborhoods.
How many people have taken advantage of that? It sounds like a great program.
She'll get the number, but I will say to you, it's not enough. We find people, because of their histories, not trusting government. Language is a challenge, so that's why we have diversified the languages of the employees within our department to build the confidence and trust. Financial resources, because it's a matching program sometimes, and so all of those are challenges and gaps that we aggressively work on to get the number up. She'll give you the exact number, but whatever it is, it could be and should be more.
Yeah, we've done 45 over the life of the program, which I think it's been about 4 years. I'll say, at the risk of contradicting my boss, well, I would like to do more. We are now being more deliberate in targeting minority business owners, our most lower income corridors, the places that we really feel need it, and so that takes more work and more lead time. A lot of times we put those businesses into our Biz Coach program first and say, work with the Biz Coach, that's one-on-one sort of coaching, and then submit the application. So it's just taking longer to get them there, but we feel like the ones we're doing are going to be that much more impactful when we get them done.
And so how do people know about this program?
We rely on, like most of our programs, we rely on our business service team who are, out in the field, as well as our commercial corridor managers. So they are staff who are staff at a CDC who, their job is to go out and talk to businesses on the corridors. And again, that program in particular, in-store, is not a citywide program. It's only for targeted corridors. So it's a discrete population that we're advertising it to, yeah.
Okay, I'm only bringing it up because I think one of our challenges is the level of entrepreneurship in the city. When you look at the numbers, the city as a total, I think we're at 78.8% of our businesses are owned by white people, 10% are Asian, and 2.4% are African American. So I'm curious because this is the kind of program that probably would help a lot of our businesses, and we need to build that because, even going to $15 an hour and saying that's a living wage at $30,000 a year, I'm not so sure that is a living wage in today's world. But entrepreneurship can lead people to a much better, I always say, you make a living working, you create wealth owning. So we can build more entrepreneurship, and this is a great program that can help people. I would be in favor of it. I have a bigger question I wanted to ask you. 211,000 people, or 40% of our population, commutes to jobs in the suburbs every day. And New York City is 15%. We're at 40%. And then when you look at the wealth really isn't in the city. The wealth of this region is in the suburbs. I'll give you one example. Our highest zip code, 19106, highest wealth, compared to Gwinnett Valley. Gwinnett Valley's wealth is 118,000 on average higher, 57% higher. We have not really attracted the wealth from all the wealth, when you look at a wealth chart, is in the suburbs. What can we do to bring, I'm going to be bold, 100 companies that are in the suburbs to get them to, I know you're working on this, to open up more than a branch office because the talent is in the city. The millennials are in the city. And no millennial is saying to us, I can't wait to move to Wayne, Pennsylvania. Just not happening, okay? They want to live in Philadelphia. What can we do to, Vanguard opened an office, I know that, but there's tokenism, it's not a big deal. Like Boston, Fidelity is in the city. How do we get these larger companies, target 100 of them, knock on their door, figure out how to bring them to the city in order to create more jobs and cut down on the traffic? You got 211,000 people commuting outside the city. And I know this is not easy because the other piece of this, and we need to hear from you about this, is that 81% of the people who left Philadelphia from 2010 to 2016 did not have children. And they left for two reasons. Number one, taxes, and number two, job opportunities. 19% had children, 81% did not. You're our commerce director. We need to support you. What tools do you need from us to change that equation?
You said the magic word, taxes. The business income receipts tax is an obstacle, but more than that, the wage tax is an obstacle. We could recite song and verse, though it's confidential, the names, but many companies, particularly in our western suburbs, in Montgomery, Delaware, and Chester County who look at Philadelphia, but because they have already rooted themselves in the suburbs, their management team, their executives, making, $300, $400, $500 million a year, they are not going to relocate when they've got to give up $3,500 per every $100,000. They're not going to make that change. And if I were out there, I wouldn't do it either. So as long as our wage tax is what it is, the legacy companies are not going to relocate. We're having a very reasonable success getting startups to come because they don't have all that fixed salary base already owning houses and already in schools in the suburbs. So our western suburbs, as long as we have that gap, though it's reducing, it's going to be a long time before I think that we can overcome that hurdle because they don't have it. And also, so wage tax and business income receipts tax. I chaired the tax task force now 11 years ago. That was the issue then. It's still the issue now. And based upon the graduated declines, it'll still be the issue 5-6 years from now. Quite frankly, that's one of the reasons that big company did not choose Philadelphia, that we hope they had chosen, would have given us the opportunity for increased income to make better choices.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Blackwell.
Thank you, Mr. President. There was much discussion, obviously, and Councilwoman Parker brought up the whole issue of cleaning our commercial corridors. We're glad to get a penny more, but we would rather have you price out for our corridors what is required and let us see what we can do. We'd like to come forward and have our corridors clean. It's frustrating every year to come here, talk about corridor cleaning, and our corridors are still dirty. If you pick up the trash Saturday night, by Sunday night, or Saturday afternoon, by even Saturday night, it's filthy again. We want a successful plan at corridor cleaning, and at least something, you all know what would be required, at least a goal to which we can reach so that we don't fail at corridor cleaning every year and come back and we have the same programs every year and we have to hear the people contact us, talk to us, even when we have new corridor strips, even when we have new businesses open. They end up being dirty, just as the L is that we got to talk about at some point. In that relationship to our corridors, cleaning that up, we've got to clean our city up, and we would like for you to work with us about creating the goals we need for various corridors and what that would require. Can you do that for us?
We'll be happy to provide that plan, and then it will be the decision that council and the mayor's office will have to make about affordability. But we have the plan.
All right.
We can give you a small, a medium, and a large.
Thank you. We don't mind fighting our fights. We just need to be armed with the details we need. Thank you very much.
We'll be happy to do that.
Thank you. And we are still working on various areas. I'm waiting for a meeting with my vendors that you all are supposed to set up for me, so somebody can get that done for me. We've got to do something because of our vendor issues on 52nd Street. So I'm waiting to hear from you all on that. And number 3, we're still working on Africa Town, as you know. Got a good beginning, putting all the property areas together. We talk about it, and we're looking forward to bringing that new and exciting program to you. It'll be myself and Councilman Johnson. We've been working hard over there, and that's going to be a very, very, very exciting project. And the last thing I'd like to mention is that we still are working with Penn on Penn Assist. As you all know, colleagues, we talked about that here. Penn Assist And we have a program also with Brandywine and Drexel doing the same things, where we train and hire students and people in those zip codes so that they can work. And we also ask them to pay, Brandywine has paid out millions of dollars to the organizations in their district who want to help their community. So there are exciting programs around that we can refer to. It's been hard to get here, but that is moving along fine. So I think that's it for me, Mr. President. Anybody have anything they want to say to me that I need to consider? Or are we good?
Not that has not already been said, Councilwoman. Thank
Thanks.
you.
So I'll look to hear from one of your folks on my vendors.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Thank you, Council President. Just had a couple questions for Ms. Harper regarding the Office of Economic Opportunity. And I just want to thank you for the work you have been doing in moving that department forward since you have taken the helm in terms of your leadership. My question revolves around enforcement and how we deal with companies that do not make their goals. Part of the report says 22 out of 41 eligible departments exceeded their departmental goals, and 17 surpassed the city's 35% overall participation goal. And so if 22 out of 41 reached their goal, how are we monitoring the remaining departments that didn't reach their goal, right? If you can answer that for me. And then also, when we introduce ordinances for developers to do projects here in the city of Philadelphia, obviously there's the EOP plan that's a part of it. Can you explain to me regarding your enforcement process and how we're tracking each individual council member's projects and making sure that the developers and the contractors are reaching their goals? And then I also remember one time you were here, some of this has to deal with capacity, right? In terms of your staff being able to handle the significant amount of development projects that come through the city of Philadelphia, and someone consistently staying on top of those contractors and developers to making sure that they're following up and reaching the goals set off in the EOP program. So if you could explain those three aspects for me, that would be helpful.
Sure, I'll start with the last. So we were fortunate last year to be able to hire 2 EOP managers. And because we've hired 2 EOP managers, we can now staff the over 30 oversight committees that are in existence right now, and it's growing. So we have about 9 pending committees that are going to start pretty soon. So we have feet on the ground at the committees. We also have feet on the ground on the work sites, taking a look. The issue is when you talk about penalizing a private developer, it's very difficult because what are we going to do? So the biggest thing that we can do to penalize a private developer is highlight the problem and highlight the issue publicly, which we try to avoid doing. We try to come to some terms or meet the goal. However, if we do not meet the goal, we will publicize through our reports that they did not meet the goal. We also have an EORC committee, which people are invited to. We ask them to testify, and that also highlights an issue. In terms of departments in the city, the participation rate is part of what the mayor looks at when he's evaluating a commissioner. So out of all of the different factors that go into their annual review, participation is one of those goals or one of the things that's looked at. And so, most commissioners really do want to meet the goal, and most are trying to meet the goal. And so I would say that that is one thing. The other remedies that we have include corrective action plans, include holding payments, and include debarment as well.
I think that's sort of like, and I don't want to penalize, I don't want to say penalize from a negative aspect, because we want people to do business with the city of Philadelphia. But however, if they sign up for an EOP plan and says that these are our goals that we agree to, like a lot of them will come into this room and do the song and dance
Yes.
to get through the rules committee, and they will pretty much agree to anything, that's incumbent upon us as a city, because we're still the number one big city when it comes to poverty
Yep.
in America. And so if we're going to level that playing field, part of it is holding individuals accountable, and even if they are private, I like the component of finding ways to make sure that they're going to even be sincere in reaching them goals. So you talk about corrective action plans and so forth,
Absolutely.
the withholding the payment. But even if they still move forward, there should be a database, because most developers, they come back, right? One way or the other. They have to come back and do business with the city of Philadelphia. And if they don't do what they're supposed to do, right, in good faith the first time around,
Yes.
I don't think they should have the opportunity to come back and just get back into our, come back to the city of Philadelphia and continuously to do business when we know they didn't do what they were supposed to do the first time around.
I agree. Let me also add, I left out that we do have a vendor performance module in our CCRS, in our B2G system, business to government system. Actually, no, it's PHL contracts. And so every quarter, we meet about EOPs with different departments, aviation, streets.
Thank
We
you.
review the progress, and it goes into the system where anybody that is selecting firms for a project can look and see how that firm performed on a previous project. We are about 4 months or 5 months into that process. So by the end of, by next year this time, there will be a lot of data that any department person can use to look at what's happened historically and use that to make decisions as well.
Thank you, Iola. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Gim?
Mr. Chairman. So picking up a little bit about what Councilman Johnson was saying. So Commerce is working with HRNA to do an economic development study that assesses what we're doing to attract and retain businesses, but also in particular whether the tools that we use to attract and retain businesses incentivize the kind of development that we want, which is sort of like whether our subsidies that we give to businesses actually create good quality jobs, make sure that there's a living wage, hopefully a fair work week and other types of things. But I'd love to hear whether your understanding about what HRNA will look like, will it center this idea of equity and equitable development as a part of their work in evaluating our economic incentive tools?
So HRNA is looking at sort of three things. So it's looking at what is sort of the return on investment, the utilization of the programs. We're looking at 7 programs that we use for attraction and retention of businesses. There's obviously a number of other credits and programs out there, but we focused on those. So they're looking at the utilization, the return on investment, trying to get an analysis of the but for. So would these companies have come, or would they have stayed but for the incentive or the subsidy? They're looking at our processes, the transparency, and then they're looking at how can we have a more sort of inclusive growth lens or criteria that ensures more inclusivity within those programs. Through the subsidy reporting legislation that you sponsored, they've been able to look at some of the data collected, and they've looked at all the data that is already collected by the Department of Revenue or PIDC or the different organizations that manage these programs. And then they'll make recommendations moving forward on, recommendations around transparency and process and utilization.
And have we filled out what the inclusive growth metrics actually are or what they look like? Do you have a sense?
The criteria for those subsidies. So I mean, I have a sense. So it is around, it's around wages. We haven't yet filled them out entirely. We're waiting. The report will be done by the end of this fiscal year. But we've talked about, benefits, wages, whether it's a minority-owned company, the geography of the company. So looking sort of at all those different types of criteria.
Great, thank you. I mean, obviously we want to make sure that subsidies should lead to high-quality jobs. That's partly why we give them. Otherwise, companies can do however they want. But I think part of the idea around the tools that we've got to incentivize development, we're constantly struggling to figure out whether they actually reap the kind of outcomes that we're hoping to get in on the front end, as I think the councilman has said, and we are limited in our tools to do it. So I'm looking forward to just talking a little bit more after this about the economic development study and where you think we're going to actually come out. Will they provide recommendations? Or will they just analyze what will they both analyze what we've done and the outcomes based on some of those inclusive growth metrics, among other things, and provide recommendations? Or are they only going to provide recommendations? Are they looking in the past at all?
So they're definitely looking at the past. However, they can only really track what's there. So because we haven't required, until the subsidy reporting legislation, there wasn't necessarily requirements around the wages and things like that. So they may not be able to track all of that. But they're tracking pretty much everything that they can track, and they're making recommendations moving forward. We've definitely talked to them a lot about how do we make sure that these programs continue to promote growth, but are also ensuring inclusivity. So that will definitely be part of their recommendations. Yeah, and I'd be happy to talk to you more about how that's developing.
Yeah, thank you. I would appreciate that. I had a question about the Keystone Opportunity Zone, and in particular, Commerce's financial analysis of the program. So last year, one of the things that I know kind of happened at the Board of Education was that the Board of Education does take a look at the Keystone Opportunity Zones. They were asked to take a look at the whole package. They were confronted with what was effectively probably their first big vote, a vote that impacts school funding and local development. But they didn't feel like they had, received an updated list of parcels at the time of the committee hearing, and also that they had requested a full financial analysis before their vote, and they didn't get all of that in time. So that was a lot of the discussion that they felt really without the kind of right tools that they needed to make a decision. And many of them commented significantly that they felt like they had insufficient evidence and information that the city was giving to them as a board. And I don't know that we actually, as a city council, received a full financial analysis of the KOZs and each of the different properties. So I guess my question is, do you plan to have a plan? Is there a plan to better inform both City Council and Board of Education members ahead of a vote on Keystone Opportunity Zones moving forward?
So this last round of KOZ, one of the things that was, this has happened in the last few rounds, but in this last round particularly, the state let us know very late in the process that they were accepting proposals. And because the last time, or 2 times ago when we'd applied and they didn't accept our proposal at all, and we'd put in probably more than 100 hours of work, we had not planned to submit. And so with the legislative calendar, we were required to sort of scramble to get something together. We knew we had some parcels we wanted to put in. So the reason why the Board of Education didn't get sort of the full analysis as soon as they wanted it is because we were actually kind of backtracking after the council legislation. We reduced the number of parcels significantly for what we provided to the Board of Education with what we thought really met the criteria that we wanted for the program. So now we have a much better process. I don't think that will happen again. And we're going to be much more conservative about the parcels that go into that we select for that program. So I don't think that will happen again.
And that there's a plan to inform and engage the Board of Education members as much as there is for the city. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we can provide analysis around is the amount of taxes that can be foregone. And I do want to be clear that the school district is held harmless. They actually receive a little bit more on those parcels through KOZ because of payment in lieu of taxes agreements that we have with the developers.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
but
right.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Parker, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I just want to echo the sentiments that Councilman Don put on the record about the number of Philadelphians who are now doing what we call reverse commuting. And while doing that, I want to just note and say a thank you to Mayor Kenny and his administration, because during last year's budget, it was the first time in the history of our city that we had made a contribution for commuter options in our budget. We know that about 232,000 people, close to 40% of the city's working population, do leave the city for jobs in the suburbs each day. And while I do want us to reverse that trend and bring more of those firms here, we want our people to be able to get to where the jobs are, because most importantly, we want them employed and have access to opportunity. The program was funded by PennDOT, which provided about $367,000, is operated by PUP, John Dodds, and the state requires a 15% match, and the city had never contributed, and last year, for the first time, we gave the $55,000 needed to sustain that program, so I want to thank them for that. I want to go back to the issue that Councilman Johnson talked about, and for me, this is about the OEO certification. I frequently encounter minority and women-owned businesses in the district, and when I ask them, are they certified MBE or WBE in the registry, sometimes they say no. It takes too long. It's laborious. I need a lawyer. I don't understand. So I want to know, what should be my pitch to them as they talk about the barriers to entry, the barriers to access the registry that seem so overwhelming, but I'm telling them, once you go through the process, the benefits of it are so significant that it is well worth it. So, Ms. Harper, you have done a yeoman's job in trying to, help to streamline as best as you can, but I know that there are some constraints that you are operating under. And so just talk to me, if you will, about what it is that I should be pitching.
Sure. So the city accepts businesses that are certified by third-party agencies. So we don't do the certification. And what the certification agencies have to do is ensure that the business is 51% owned and controlled by a woman or a person of color. And so the due diligence that a firm has to go through to prove that can be onerous, especially if they don't have their financial records in order. And unfortunately, a lot of small businesses do not have their financial records in order. So you have to have your taxes, you have to have your signing cards for the bank, you may have to have financial statements. It's going to depend on the stage of your business.
So let me stop you there.
Yes.
The third-party agencies that you're referencing, they're the ones, obviously, because they're independent of us, they're developing the rubric or the guidelines of everything that you are. If I'm the small business, they tell me, depending on which agency I go to, what I have to do in order to be in compliance.
That's right.
Let me ask you this. Who are they developing the criteria? Is it coming from the federal government?
Okay, so there is a federal certification, which is a DBE, disabled business. So, and not every business needs a DBE. You only need a DBE really if you want to work on federal transportation projects, airport, streets, things like that.
Okay.
Everybody, and that's free. Everybody else can use a WBE, Women's Business Enterprise Certification, or an MBE, Minority Business Enterprise Certification. And the agencies do develop a checklist. And I will say that
there might be a small difference from one agency to the other, but they pretty much want the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not that it's impossible to get, it's just that the smaller the business is, the higher the likelihood of them not having their finances in order. And so one of the things that they can do is to get technical assistance to get that financial piece in order, because you are right, once they get it, it is done, and then they only have to go back every 2 years just to say that nothing has changed.
Okay.
And
So I appreciate your just noting for the record, because when people talk about how do I get into compliance and how long it takes, that listen, that burden is not on the city of Philadelphia.
It isn't.
So the barrier to entry is not something that we here in this body can remove. Although, how long ago was it that the city? Because I know the
about 14 years ago. About 14 years ago.
I'm going to call Councilman Wilson Good and have a talk with him to figure out what we need to be doing.
Okay.
The last question is about what you mentioned when you said the MBEs and the WBEs. What happens when we see a business getting certified as a WBE, but it's actually the husband's putting the business in the wife's name. The man is the one running the business. He's calling the shot. The business benefits from being certified WBE, and it's in the city's register. So when we talk about vetting to make sure, because people are always going to find vehicles to game the system, gaming,
Yes.
right? Is it those third-party companies, or is it us? How do we do
Okay.
that vetting?
So once a business is certified in our registry, it is up to us, if that's the case, to discover it and to do something about it. And we are, and we do. And so it doesn't always lead to debarment, but we have eliminated people from the registry because of that.
Okay.
On several occasions.
Okay. All right. For the folks who are listening, and you know that someone is actually running a business and they are benefiting from a minority business enterprise certification or a women business enterprise certification, but you know that the true blue owners are not MBEs or WBEs, what's the hotline number people should be calling?
Hotline number is, should have that handy, hold on a second. It's in here. No, it's not in the back. I'm going to get you that number. I'll have it for you. I got to find it in here, but I will get it for you.
Because what
But
we'll
that is
do
exactly-
is we will e-blast the information
Oh,
out.
I have it.
Okay.
It's 215
Uh-huh.
683
Uh-huh.
1798.
215-683-1798. Any business that has a certification and is purporting to be a WBE or an MBE in the city of Philadelphia, and we know it's not true, any resident or person with knowledge of this can anonymously call 215-683-1798 and report that information.
Absolutely.
Thank you so very much, Ms. Harper.
Thank you, Council Lady. Chair recognizes Councilman Green. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, sir. Insider.
Thank you. Thank you, Council President. Some of us do come from Virginia. And I won't assess you any time for being cavalier with your comments.
Thank you. I can't wait till the speeches on behalf of the majority on Thursday. It's going to be.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I just wanted to ask a few questions regarding some of the work you've been doing in reference to trying to build the brand of the city of Philadelphia, specifically regarding the Global Impact Project, which is a new initiative, which is on continuation of the work that was done regarding Amazon and how, from my observation, that was one of the first times seeing various institutions on public sector, private sector, nonprofit institutions, higher ed institutions all come together for one initiative It seems like we're trying to use that same energy regarding the Global Identity Project. My understanding that the administration has allotted some funding, which is like $250,000, which will leverage additional private sector dollars, but I think that's something that we could do more. But I want to again get your thoughts on where we are at this point and where do you see us progressing?
Sure. So the Philadelphia Global Identity Project, we do have $250,000 allocated annually for marketing and promotion, and right now we're also using some of that for promoting opportunity zones, or will be. But basically that project is really about the fact that our brand is worse than our product. As part of the Brookings cohort, we learned that. They did a whole perception analysis looking at social media indices, and found that the world doesn't necessarily know what to think about Philadelphia, and they don't see us as a place for investment and doing business. So the CVB and Visit Philly have done a great job in terms of promoting us as a tourist destination, but in terms of people coming for more than just a couple nights and moving here, we need to do a better job. So we have an advisory board with about 60 folks, and we're now building a leadership council, and that's really around bringing dollars to the table. So it's a public-private partnership, and we want to leverage much more than one-to-one in terms of dollars from outside the city to support this project on an ongoing basis, much like CVB and Visit Philly do today for tourism and conventions.
Yeah, because one of the things that I'm going to spend some time investigating and trying to identify a dedicated funding stream for this issue because of the fact that it will provide revenue to the city of Philadelphia in ways that we have not even thought about. When you go back to when former Governor Rendell was mayor and the creation of GPTMC, which now Visit Philadelphia, really helped to spurn and also really kick off our hospitality industry, and now that's something that's such a core part of our economy is hospitality, and I think we need to have that same perspective in reference to business attraction to the city of Philadelphia on a global perspective. I think most of us in this room believe this is the best city in the nation. We have a lot of great assets, but for whatever reason we don't articulate those assets and put the information in a way that people can digest and be attracted to come to Philadelphia, and we've got to do a better job in doing that.
I agree.
In addition, there's been some work we've been doing with the procurement department regarding trying to make it easier for businesses and some preferences. Have you been working with Christine at all on some of the local preference legislation we've been working on?
The answer is yes, we have.
Any thoughts on how that may impact businesses in the city of Philadelphia? Because what we're trying to do is change the dynamic in reference to a miscellaneous purchase. Right now it's about $30,000, $32,000. Anything above that, you've got to do an RFP, trying to increase that threshold to at least $100,000. And then we also have a little carve out for preference for $75,000 and up. But most cities throughout the nation do not require an RFP at such a low number. So I'm curious on what your thoughts may be on by increasing that threshold to $100,000, how to make it easier for small businesses to do business with the city of Philadelphia, because they won't have the challenge of having to go through all the paperwork and submitting RFP, taking away time from them running their businesses.
I think that is the essence of it, and the more we do that, the more that we can provide opportunity for our local suppliers, and the more we do that, the more jobs we can create in the city such that people do not have to reverse commute. So it's all about economics and retaining the dollars in the city of Philadelphia, therefore driving the economy of Philadelphia.
And then one last question. I remember in the initial set of budget hearings, there was discussion about economic stimulus dollars and that we're actually going to be using stimulus dollars again this year. What was that amount, and then how would that be allocated?
What's the amount of the stimulus dollars? That's a very complex answer.
Our finance director has
Our
it.
finance director will break it down for you.
So for the current year, Edward Garcia, Deputy Director of Commerce for Finance Administration. So for the current fiscal year, we are allocated $3.67 million. That's an increase of a little over $2 million from last year, where we had $1.2 million. And your question was around continued funding, or?
No, just how will those dollars be allocated? Are it going to be
So,
for?
sure. So most of those dollars are allocated to commercial corridor cleaning. They go to support the ethnic chambers. They go to support things like,
Recruitment and retention of businesses. Those are the big three. Neighborhood quarters, support to our ethnic chambers, and recruitment and retention of business.
And then, Mr. President, I'll close with this. I know other colleagues have questions. I want to thank Commerce Director Epps and his staff for the work they've been doing regarding the Special Committee on Regulatory Reform and Review. We have been able to address some things in our code, but now we're focused more on policies, especially as we look at restaurants and also using CRM software to make it easier for people to do business with the City of Philadelphia and do business in the City of Philadelphia. So these are some of the things that are not necessarily the low-hanging fruit, but much more complex and challenging. And I know the Commerce Director and his staff have been very engaged in this process and the Special Committee work. Look forward to working with them going forward just to make this city a more business-friendly city so we can grow the base of small businesses that are successful in our city. And that way we'll be able to grow the city through a number of initiatives like the Global Identity Project and some of the other things that they're doing. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman Green.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Reynolds Brown.
Yes. Boy, do I have lots of follow-up. Back to the corridors piece, I want to wrap up questions around this, which is a follow-up to Councilwoman Sherelle Parker's line of questioning and Councilwoman Blackwell. So repeat these numbers. You said it's $25,000 to $60,000 for, did I take that down correctly?
Yes.
The question is, how much would it cost the City of Philadelphia to provide a baseline commercial corridor contract for cleaning and management, which clearly is a concern of most, if not all, district council members? So I just want to make sure my numbers here are correct. So what would the baseline commercial corridor contract look like? What would that number be?
The 25 to 65 is off the top of my head, like the range of the grants we provide.
Okay.
I would argue in many cases that is not enough to get the corridors to have the cleaning programs they need to be clean all the time.
All right.
And I do think that the proposals we've just received and that we're reviewing right now will get us those numbers, of what that Councilwoman Parker and Councilwoman Blackwell asked about is like, what would what should it look like?
Okay. You may not be able to get to this answer, but my notes tell me that you provide funding to 40 CDCs currently, correct? Based on your
in that particular program we were talking about,
under that particular program, yes. And so, of that, how many bids does the city receive for commercial corridor contracts of the 40 CDCs that you fund?
There are, I believe, 14 bids in the city.
Is that right?
I might be off by one or two.
Okay.
And we and the bids are organizations that support themselves through assessments on their property taxes. In some cases, some of those organizations receive additional money that leverages, the property owner's investments.
Okay. One, I try to follow what I call the next generation of leadership, women in particular, particularly women who look like me and what they're doing.
Yeah,
and one I've been following for the last 10 years is Shalimar Thomas. We now know that she's the executive director of the North Broad Street Renaissance. When I look to see what's happening up there in a magnificent way, why do you believe we're not able to see that same level of progress in other corridors around the city? Is it funding? Is it leadership? Is it connectedness to the appropriate city departments? What is it? Please.
Can't do it. I'm not allowed to do it. I just want to just do a point of information. You probably can't duplicate the work of Shalimar Blakely. She's a former staff of State Representative Kenyatta Johnson. So I think it's going to be pretty hard to see that same level of quality service along any other corridor besides NBR in North Philadelphia. I just want to state that for the record as a point of information. Thank you, Councilwoman, for allowing me the leeway to provide that point of information.
I will only provide the high-level response in addition to complimenting the work of Shalimar Thomas. I worked with her when she was with the African American Chamber of Commerce.
Yes.
But, Councilwoman, please take into consideration the fact that Broad Street is one of the centerpieces of Philadelphia, and it is blessed with great transportation. And so if you look at both Broad and Market, they are the epitome of what we would want to have around transportation-based development. And so a lot of, so let's just start with that.
Okay.
Then
Well taken.
then talk about it as anchored with one of our premier universities in the city called Temple University, as is West Market with Drexel and Penn. So two things that those have in common: transportation, universities, and hospitals.
Okay.
Okay, and so a lot of this renaissance is coming by people choosing to be without automobiles, and where they choose to live, work, and play, as close to a transportation node as they can get. Now you can get into other levels, but let's just start with that fundamental.
Okay, that's very, very, very helpful. So let me ask the question, are there regular meetings with corridor, with businesses on those 40 corridors, where you get a chance to share all the information that you've talked about today in terms of technical assistance? I guess my concern is the connectedness between the important work that you all do as a department and businesses on the front line who are trying to survive and thrive.
Yeah.
The startling number for me is 2.4 African American owned businesses. So where are we missing it that we can't pump up that number that's been identified by Councilman Don? That is, it's an eye opener.
So that I would say that is a multi-layered, multi-generational challenge. I mean, you and I could go to dinner and spend 4 hours philosophizing about the fact that we still have a 33% dropout rate out of high school. Let's start with.
So let's start with low-hanging fruit, because those are the obvious answers for sure. Entrepreneurial programs.
Yes.
And that might be run by the business Della Clark, who does exceptional work out there. Connectedness with the African American Chamber of Commerce. Is there an entrepreneurial program that could be funded by Commerce to train?
We do that. We have entrepreneurial startup technical assistance in many of our nonprofits. We could always have more, but again, it still comes back to the administration has to make choices about funding. We take the dollars that we do have and we try to leverage and maximize them. Of course, we'd love to have more. So, yes, we are out at every level, from hand-holding to 10KSB and everything in between, trying to provide opportunities for people to start, scale, grow, expand, develop their business.
Okay.
And it's obvious by the numbers we need to do more.
Let's go now to the contractor goals. You mentioned that there are a number of remedies or penalties that you offer for those who don't meet goals. How many companies were barred last year from ever doing business again with the city of Philadelphia since the last time we sat down here a year ago?
There are 3 pending debarments right now.
So the answer is none.
None.
Okay. Of the remedies that you've mentioned, how many have you employed? You mentioned a number of remedies or warnings that you give to companies who don't honor up.
Yes.
And so while it's important to hear that there are different remedies, it's more important to show the numbers of companies that are not doing what they've committed to do on paper. That's the information that we need to see.
Okay. Well, I don't have an exact number, but I can tell you that we have, on a number of occasions, requested corrective action plans, and on a number of occasions have stopped payment. We can look up the number and get back to you.
Going forward, make that a part of the testimony.
Okay.
So that we as members know year to year, companies that are getting it right and companies that are taking advantage of the system, not doing the right thing, and therefore need to be given the penalty that comes with not implementing what they reduced to paper. I think the bell rang, didn't it? bell rang, so I'll
Thank
wait
you.
around.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Down.
Thank you, Council President. Good afternoon. A couple quick questions. I may not know the answer. You can get back to me. Do we collect, no, this may be you or revenue, do we collect BERT revenues from Grubhub, those kinds of programs?
Do we collect BERT revenue from Grubhub?
From Grubhub. We collect BERT from Grubhub or businesses like that.
You get back to me, let me know. I just want to
We'll
make
have to
sure,
get back to you.
like, when these things are occurring over the internet, that we're collecting our appropriate taxes.
The question is, do they owe it?
Yeah, or are we charging for BERT revenues from Grubhub? Because they do business in the city.
Yes. We'll have to find out from revenue.
We'll find out.
Yes.
The other question is, follow up from Councilman Green, the Amazon video that you all did, which was great, did we ever make that available to, can we get a copy of that then, of the Amazon video? But not Amazon, but just in general.
We have de-Amazoned it, and it's now on our, what is it called, Philadelphia-delivers.com.
Is that maybe available to the chair? We can get it distributed?
Yes.
Okay. And then the other question, you've been reading in the newspaper, is Commerce involved with Joel Friedman, the person who bought Hahnemann Hospital, and the issue they're having there with the job loss?
We're about to be.
Excuse me?
We are about to be.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I mean, I'm concerned. I don't want that hospital to close. I don't want to lose those jobs.
We have talked to some of the appropriate people.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's like looming out there. There's a lot of jobs, and
That is correct.
yeah. Okay. And then the other question, I assume you're at the table for the opportunity zones. There's 62 opportunity zones in the city, and are you involved in that at all?
Planning is, between Commerce and Planning, we are very actively involved, along with PIDC, yes.
Okay. And the other quick housekeeping, we had passed that bill, remember, on the incentives. Do we have any reports yet on the incentives that are coming up soon?
It's coming up, yeah. We're in the final couple months at this point, and we'll have that wrapped up at the end of this fiscal year.
And just to refresh everyone's memory, that was a report of the 21 incentives we offer to determine 7 per year, I think it was.
We're looking at 7 of them right now, the ones that
Right.
we use for business attraction and retention.
Okay.
But every 3 years, we'll do an analysis, and it can vary. It could be looking at one, it could be looking at all of them.
Okay. And then the other, I just want to make a comment about, you know what Penn Health is doing, which is phenomenal. We talk about job creation. Well, we can't create jobs in government. We can engage the private sector to help create jobs. And Penn, I just want to make sure you're involved with, is it Kevin Mahoney, the new head of Penn? Because they made a commitment back in January of 18 to invest $50 million in cell therapy companies in Philadelphia. So we'll make sure we're aware of this, and we're doing everything we can. They want to open 45 new cell therapy companies. We're number 1 in the world for immunotherapy. And the commitment is as follows. The companies must be located in the city of Philadelphia. Phenomenal. They'll only invest up to 50% of the equity required. So if they need $10 million for a new company, they'll only invest 5. They want to see validation from the outside. And they have now opened, I believe, 8 companies, I don't know how many jobs, maybe 1,000 jobs, high-paying jobs that have good economic job multipliers. They've invested $14 million. Here's the kicker. They've attracted $650 million.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Amazing. Amazing. So, I mean, when you talk about job growth, more of those types of models we need to engage the private sector in. There'll be up to 45 new companies. We're going to kill it throughout the world on this type of cell therapy. We'll probably be called Silicon Valley or something. But it's going to be unbelievable for the city. So I'm just mentioning this because whatever we can do in commerce, administration, to support them and to help them, it's huge. It's going to be big for the city.
We're definitely looking at that. Right now, about 80% of venture capital is imported into Philadelphia, and that's a problem in terms of startup creation and retaining companies. So we're definitely looking at how we and it's fine that if those companies stay here that they're getting their money from elsewhere, but we need there to be more capital here so that companies feel that attracts more companies and we retain more.
Okay. And then the other, I want to just make a comment on the 40% of the people that commute to the suburbs. You're absolutely right. 10 years ago, it was city wage taxes and BERT taxes, right? And today it's city wage taxes and BERT taxes. And 10 years from now, it'll be city wage taxes and BERT taxes.
Unless we choose to do something different.
Right, so that's my point. I would like to ask the Commerce Department, you have people, very talented people there, to come back to this body with what you think we can do to change that equation. I don't want to have the same pattern. What do we need to do? Do we need to phase out certain taxes? What do we need to do? Do we need, look what we did, and you can argue this point forever, but prior to 1999, you rarely saw new construction in this city. They put a tax abatement in at that point. What do we need to do to attract these jobs in the city that are in the suburbs? So I'm not asking for an answer now, I'm just asking to take the challenge and come back to us.
Okay.
Last but not least, I'm going to open your eyes to an idea and just throw it out there, because if you don't think big, it doesn't happen. One of the major reasons we didn't probably get Amazon, whether we wanted to get it or not, whatever, was we didn't have the tech talent in the city.
That is correct.
And so what can we do to work jointly together with all these, to attract Carnegie Mellon to open in Philadelphia, and maybe join with Comcast and others to support them, maybe to build a third building where there's a Carnegie Mellon University in Philadelphia as a branch, but thinking like that, like outside the box, and bringing that kind of potential resources to the city, which would be huge for Philadelphia, not just in one category, but there's a whole trickle-down effect across the board. So I'm just throwing it out there for some of you to think about.
That is a conversation that has been had.
And any results?
It's a conversation that's been had.
Okay. And last but not least, well, actually two more last but not least. Can we focus on identifying maybe 100 suburban companies and knocking on their door? You're probably doing this already, but really focus to figure out how to get them to at least open a branch or do something in the city that would be better than just a tokenism type office.
Well, we don't have a list of 100, but we do have a list of a couple of dozen.
And are we?
And we have made some of those calls, and we continue to make those calls.
When you look at Vanguard, do you know how many buses pick up the people from the train station to take them to their headquarters that come out of Philadelphia every day?
Yes.
It's like insane. I mean, we should be able to attract them into the city. Last but not least, I want to just mention this, the business coach program. I still think, I've mentioned this before, that we need to do a comprehensive where if you want to open a business in Philadelphia, you call Commerce and you connect them with one person who walks them through the whole process with every administration, but everyone in the other departments realizes that Commerce has priority and they need to address their issues and not let them wait 3, 4, or 5 weeks. I know people that have tried to open up different businesses that it's taken them a year, 14 months, 18 months, and it's not the Commerce Department's fault. It's other departments that aren't getting to this issue. And those are job creations. They shouldn't have that red tape. You need one person to walk them from the day they inquire to the grand opening, cutting the ribbon, and getting them in there much faster.
So one of the things that Councilman Green mentioned is through the Regulatory Reform Committee, we are working on ways to streamline, simplify, and then automate. And so that scenario is one of the things that's being contemplated.
Except I will say this, if you don't have somebody who works in the Commerce Department walking that business owner through, it's a daunting task to work with the city. Okay.
Through the food business pilot, we've sort of learned different types of businesses have numerous different processes. So it really is about, we've had health department, revenue department, L&I, commerce, a bunch of different departments at the table talking about how we improve the process. It really does vary by types of businesses. So it's probably more of an interdepartmental unit that's needed as opposed to one person, because one person could never learn all the processes for all the different types of businesses that are required.
And one of the reasons that we have started with the prototype of food is 1 out of 4 businesses that open in Philadelphia are food and beverage related.
All right, well, thank you very much. Thank you for your great work, and thank you, Council President.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman McGinn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Fair Chance Hiring Initiative because it's an evolution of new incentives. But this is the initiative that reimburses local employers who hire formerly incarcerated individuals. So could you talk a little bit about how the program how you feel it's been successful and how you changed it so that instead of a tax credit, it became a front-ended grant, and what lessons you think that we've learned from that?
You want me to talk, Sheila, or do you want to come up? Sure. So we saw that the PREP tax credit, the tax credit that's in place for returning citizens had major underutilization. We now have a lot more demand. I believe we're at about 76 jobs created and about 50, 60 that are in the process now. So we had a little bit of a slow start with the program. I mean, it was a pilot, but in terms of the matching up, because you have to have the individuals ready for the jobs before you place them, and we had a little bit of a slow start in terms of that process, but now it's moving smoothly, and we have a couple more, I think, providers in terms of where we can go for those applicants or those employees. But it certainly has garnered a lot more demand and utilization, and it's not dependent on having BERT liability. And I should mention, now that there's the exemption on the first 100,000, far fewer businesses have BERT liability to even apply for tax credit. So we honestly, through this incentive study, we're going to need to, as a city, look at a lot of our tax credits that are based on BERT, because there's a lot where now a lot of businesses don't have a BERT liability to take a credit against.
Right.
Especially smaller businesses.
And are there certain employers where they're landing with that these individuals have? Are there notable success stories that you might want to share with us? Hello.
Hi, Sheila Ireland, the Office of Workforce Development. So I think we learned a couple of lessons from fair chance hiring. I think the most important lesson is to really understand the labor market and how we can connect people who do not necessarily have middle skills available to that labor market. We also understood specifically how small business, medium-sized business in particular, because those are the people that we're mostly working with, it's not necessarily large organizations, how they hire, what incentives actually move them to hire returning citizens, and what their processes are to get there. So as Sylvie talked about a little bit earlier, the matching process of people who are actually being released and the skills that they have, and then the employer engagement process, what kind of jobs do we have that we're looking for? Sometimes there's a little bit of a mismatch. And if you remember with Fair Chance, they have to pay at least $12 an hour, which requires a certain lot of skills for people to be connected to. So I think we're learning that. I think intentionally what you'll see coming out as we expend the remaining funds is a print media campaign, because we want to reach out to more businesses to understand specifically, to have them understand that the grant is available for them to be able to take advantage of. I think that disconnect is some of what you see.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we're looking at is how we can expand similar types of programs to serve other extremely vulnerable populations. So in particular, for me, I think that we've been looking at youth exiting foster care as being a highly vulnerable population and desperately in need of connection to education, jobs, training, and housing. And do you feel like the program has been successful enough that you might consider expanding it to test market other populations, other vulnerable populations, and see how it works there? What's the trajectory for the Fair Chance Hiring Program right now? What are you looking at?
So I'd have to say, I think the intent behind the program is there. I think there was not enough, if I can say, there was not enough monies allocated to process, right? So the thought process was that the $5,000 would incentivize an HR director to do hiring in a different way. As a former HR director, I'll tell you $5,000 is probably not enough. That would be number one. Secondly, the skills mismatch is real, right? There's not a lot of intentionality, and you need the resources and people in place to effectively understand what skill sets are we trying to place. I think what you had with Fair Chance is two separate things going on, right? You had employers who were interested, and you had returning citizens who were interested. And the matching process requires resources and sophisticated personnel to be able to do that. To understand how to traverse the labor market today, especially with different requirements for different fields, and especially in a digital market, a largely digital market. It's a very different thing than it was placing people even 5 years ago.
So you don't see an expansion right now? Are you seeing the program go as is? Are you expanding it? Are you
So,
looking at other populations? Or are
I'm
you
thinking
keeping
what
it
we're,
to?
yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a wonderful thing. I really do, right? I just don't think the system is in place, and I think the way we've switched the program a little bit to allocate some monies towards having the right personnel in place to be able to execute it definitely will help us, especially as we, like I said, as we move into the print media campaign. It is about getting the word to a broader swath of people so that the skills that we're trying to engage returning citizens, the ones that they have, we can engage them in the employers that we have. Right now, it's just employers who show up.
Yeah, for
Right.
this fiscal year coming up, we're not expanding it because since we had a slower start, we're actually expending the funds, and we're making some changes since the first year was a pilot. We're making some switches to the program to improve upon it. But I mean, I do think that we want to continue the program, and should we see the successes that we're expecting to see, we'd want to grow it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's helpful, and I'm sure we'll be continuing that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Thank you, Council President. I think it's the young lady who was just sitting at the
Sheila?
table. Miss Sheila. I didn't want to say the wrong name, Miss Sheila. I just want to get an update on the last time we met in my office, Michael D. Bardinas was the managing director's office. I have a strong interest in the city's model employee campaign. And if you could just explain to the rest of the members of council what that program is, the status of the program. I think it's critically important that when we talk about putting people to work, regardless of if they've made a mistake in the past, this is a pathway for individuals, particularly young men, an opportunity to get involved in something that's positive as opposed to standing on the corner. I've also asked Brian Abernathy to reach out to you, Sheila, to see how this program can be partnered with the Office of Violence Prevention. We are in a crisis right now in the city of Philadelphia when it comes to gun violence and shooting. That number continues to increase each day. And so we got to think outside the box to get our young people involved in something that's positive. And this is a program that I have an interest in, but I'll let you give your report as to what progress have we made. We met about a year ago in my office with Michael D. Bardinas, so I want to see where we're at in this process now. Thank you.
So just a brief overview. So City as Model Employer is the city's, for lack of a better word, internal workforce development process. It's us walking the talk that we talk about to other workforce development agencies. It's across 10 operating departments in the city of Philadelphia, 3 of which are particularly active: the Hospitality Careers Program at Aviation, Future Track at Streets Department, which I think you're very familiar with. We're trying to launch a program with 311 as well for call center operators. And then the Free Library of Philadelphia has an extensive number of placements in their library training. It's intended to move the temp and seasonal workforce, which we have about 2,000 employees, into full-time permanent. And so we've been working across those departments, doing things like engaging civil service and creating more career paths and accelerated career paths and titles for people to be able to enter into city employment, because we believe it's a valuable path for folks we are trying to serve. One thing I do want to clarify: the requirements for entering into the jobs are the same as civil service. So in instances where we're able to work with Opportunity Youth or returning citizens, like in Future Track, we do. In instances at Hospitality Careers at the airport, which is covered by TSA regulations, we can't. What I like most about the program is the breadth of opportunity across the departments. It's not just one job. It's not, some of the things that we focus on a lot of times, like street sweeping. There's a variety of opportunities available there. And it allows us, to utilize the work that we are doing across the board in the Office of Workforce Development to create opportunity. So for instance, recruitment and selection for Philly Future Track now will focus on the pinpoint maps in roadmaps, right, to specifically recruit from those areas, right? There's some synergy that you'll like about that.
Go ahead.
So currently, today, we're at 176
Yeah, can you give me
placements.
numbers? You said
176, that's where we are today.
176?
Yes.
And that's across how many different departments?
That's across the 10 operating departments.
10?
Yeah.
Okay. And what's the recruitment strategy? I know obviously you said you're going to marry. I'm glad you told me about Pinpoint and the roadmap to safer neighborhoods, that the connection between the two, which I think is great. I haven't heard that until today. I think that's a critical component. What other ways are we going about recruiting? And not just individuals who may have a past, because a lot of times you have just good young men who are followers, who are just hanging around the bad guys, but if they get involved in something that's positive, they won't be standing on the corner. And I've seen it with my own eyes with Future Track. I mean, I almost cried one day. I saw about, Council President, about 20 young men coming down of a corner I grew up on 18th and Dickinson, right? Having fun, laughing, joking, these blue suits on. And I know they could be somewhere doing something else negative. You hear me, Harold? Like they're involved in something that's positive, and we gave them that opportunity and that pathway out of some of the challenges they're facing inside their neighborhood. So I am smiling that you're saying one component is working with Operation Pinpoint thus far, looking at those neighborhoods that are more prone to young people getting involved in violence to participate in this program. What are the other strategies and methods to recruit people?
So the recruitment strategies are centered on the departments, right? So Streets Department recruits broadly and in a community-based fashion. Other departments do not. We don't necessarily control the recruitment aspect of City as Model Employer. We do work with the department's HR department, and we follow their guidelines.
So why won't they follow our guidelines, your guidelines? Because you run the show. And to be quite frank, I don't want to leave it up to the department heads to aggressively push this agenda that the mayor wants to see happen, when I think the buck would really stop with you, because we're not asking all the other departments those questions. I'm asking you these questions. And so however this, the hierarchy is, I think at some point in time, rather than having a conversation with Brian Abernathy or the mayor himself, the reality is I will empower you to track and follow what the other departments are doing. Because what if they don't have that same type of commitment, right, to make sure that there's a strategic plan to recruit people to participate in the city's model employees campaign. That's how I think it should operate, or at least somebody should be evaluating each department. Like tomorrow, I'll be calling the library, when the library comes here, and say, okay, you want this budget of $15 million you're asking for. I'm asking for 6, but separate from your diversity and inclusion issues. How are you operating with the City of Philadelphia Model Employees campaign? And I don't honestly think any of them will probably respond favorably if they even on point to even think about it. But I don't know. I don't want to speak off the cuff. I just think the buck stops with you, Sheila, just to be upfront with you. That's my
No,
personal
I
opinion.
totally agree. And I think if you look at our plans for City as Model Employer, our intent was to operate as the internal workforce development agency for the city.
That's my
With
point,
us being the central recruitment, selection, training organization, and them being our clients where we place people. That requires significant resources of both people and personnel, and some realignment of processes to make happen.
Okay, let's make that happen then. I think it should be a priority. When you talk about resources, we have a surplus. I keep hearing this every time I'm out on the trail. And people trying to encourage me to repeal, the beverage tax and so forth. And the first thing they say is we have this significant surplus to do X, Y, and Z. And I told them I've been here for eight budgets, right? It's a whole different conversations, but we don't have the funding to do rebuild across the board as they say we do, and pre-K on the level that we're going to do. That's a whole different conversation, but they keep talking about the surplus that we're supposed to have. And I do know we have a surplus because part of the last budget process was some funding was going into reducing our pension obligations and so forth. So this is important.
Yes.
We're still the number one big city when it comes to poverty in America, right? So we have to turn up the heat and be more aggressive when we address this issue of poverty, and also not just poverty, people living in deep poverty. I mean, they're only making $5,500 a year, not on public assistance, meaning I work, right? I'm a proud worker, but I'm only making $5,500. So I think we have to do more of an aggressive, like, it's a crisis, like the sky is falling, and let's get as many people involved in these programs, particularly the city has a model employee program, as possible. And you have an ally that will work with you to aggressively push the needle forward. I have an emphasis on our young people because they are dying in the streets. And if we're going to tell them to put down the guns, what are we replacing it with?
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, that's the tone I believe that we have to have, and that's the aggressive approach I'm going to be taking as we move forward to make sure this program is successful. So Sheila, thank you for your dedication and your commitment, particularly on this particular initiative.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Reynolds Brown.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very well stated, Councilman Johnson. I couldn't agree with you more. Just in your eloquence of stating how we have to take bold steps if we want to move the paradigm and shift the needle. Please tell us, Ms. Sheila Ireland, how long have you been on board? I know that Commerce Director Harold Epps spoke in past hearings that this was going to happen. You're now here. Welcome aboard. How many months old are you?
I am 13 months old.
A little over a year.
Yes.
So we do welcome you because the issue of workforce development has come up repeatedly in past hearings. With the President's consent and that of leadership, I think it would be useful and extremely helpful if members had a briefing with you. Irregularly, we invite department heads or new division heads to come in and brief council members on who you are and what you do. So I'm going to speak to President Clark about you joining us one Thursday after City Council and briefing us on the new intimacies and cross-departmental linkages that are now going to take place so that we can indeed lift up the important role that you have. It's exceedingly important. During the hearings with the Office of Finance, I raised this question. They actually said I should punt this question to you. On page 2 of Finance Department's testimony, they said, and I quote, the Finance Department worked closely with the Mayor's Office of Diversity and Inclusion, the Managing Director's Office, and the Commerce Department to promote what they call equitable and inclusive policies throughout the city's grant seeking and grant management processes or practices. So are you able to tell us what those equitable practices might be with regards to grant seeking and grant management, because they felt that you were the more appropriate person to ask this question?
So I think in terms of the grants that we provide, so we have a lot of different contracts, so performance-based contracts that are based on RFPs. Is that what you're referring to? So,
yes.
So all of those we do with a fully transparent process. We have a panel for each of those. We ensure a diverse panel with expertise, and everyone is selected through a scoring process. We make that process known through the RFP process, and then and all of the determinations are based on that process. I think that may be what you're referring to.
Okay. All right.
Councilwoman, it could also
Please.
be that we are very close to launching a way for OEO to review all of the diversity on nonprofit contracts. Over half of the city's budget is dedicated to nonprofits, and so OEO is supposed to collect information on their senior staff, on their board, on their workforce, the executive director, where the executive director lives, and we haven't been able to do that because the larger departments collect nonprofit data and they report it out, but some of the smaller departments do not. So
And
we
the
have
the reason for that is what? Just lack of
it's no
staffing?
consistency. There's no
Okay.
consistency. So we have developed an electronic form that's going to go to all nonprofits that the city does business with.
and we anticipate it's going to go out in May, and it'll be due back at the end of July. And OEO will now be able to report on all of the workforce, how the nonprofit spends their money, their executive director. All of that information will be available in the OEO annual report as well.
That's music to our ears. For those who want to do business with the city, if they're not helping the mayor and his team leaders to meet goals, then they don't deserve to do business with the city. And the only way you get to know that is by collecting the information that you do. Going back to Councilman Dom's numbers, 2.4% of the businesses are African American. Might you be able to tell us what percentage of those are African American women-owned businesses?
Ooh, I don't have it broken out by women.
Could you please, when you
Yes.
can, provide that for us? The last question speaks to it's linked to one second. To the oversight committees. Just give us an update on where the Office of OEO, where your office is with regards to the oversight committees, and has the implementation of additional oversight committees yielded or revealed any new challenges or opportunities around diversity hiring and subcontracting?
Sure. I will say that our public works number it has increased for the year of FY18. And I believe that is due to attention paid on oversight committees. We currently have 26 oversight committees, and I have it broken down by council district, and I can get that to you if you're interested. And so our guys are all over, and they're on the job sites as well. So I think that has resulted in an increase in our public works participation.
Yes.
We have a 4% increase in public works for FY18, and I really think that's due to increased attention.
That's encouraging.
Councilwoman, also, OEO has an advisory group.
Yes.
And one of the things that we continue to learn, both inside and outside the government, is the area of professional services and the very challenging pursuit it is to get those dollars to be as inclusive as they need to be. So the areas of accounting, the areas of finance, the areas of insurance, asset management, both in the government and the private sector, are fraught with great opportunity for participation, both for people of color and women.
Mm-hmm. You said are what?
Great opportunities. They are significantly underpenetrated.
Okay.
Underpenetrated.
Okay, so you've ID strategies to change that paradigm?
We are working on them, yes. And in some cases inside the government, it requires change of language.
Okay.
And so, yes,
And so
these are new learnings and new opportunities for further penetration in the areas typically have been off limits.
Yes. Okay, then. Thank you very much. The work you do is enormous, but as Councilman Johnson articulated, it's really the underpinning and the foundation of everything else if we want to change that criticism that we hear too often, the poorest, largest city in the country. So thank you for your work, all of you. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Dom.
Thank you, Mr. President. By the way, Memphis and Detroit might be worse than us in poverty.
They are. They just don't have a million people.
So we're not at the bottom, at least. So.
Yeah, exactly. We are our own worst enemy sometimes.
Yeah. I think we're doing a lot on the education front. We're trying to do a lot. And we still have the poverty issue of 400,000 people. We still have the deep poverty in the last 4 years that went up 12 to 14%, increased by 29,000 people, deep poverty. And our budget went up 21% in 4 years, the largest 4-year increase we've seen. I don't think we're doing enough for the 18 to 50-year-olds. And I know we have all these different programs, but clearly that's a segment that we need to address maybe in much greater needs. And jobs clearly are the number one way out of poverty, by far. It is the number one way to get out of poverty, is a good paying job.
That's correct.
Since you're the Commerce Director, and you're about jobs, if you don't have to answer this now, could you provide us with an action plan with the strategies and tactics to get us in the next 4 years to take 50,000 people out of poverty?
The administration can provide that plan. It's way beyond Commerce, but yes.
You said the administration can provide the plan?
Yes, we can provide,
Okay.
yes, we can.
I would like to see what that looks like, but I mean, I think it should be a plan that's done by all the collective bodies of this government.
So
because
do we.
That's the biggest issue we're dealing with. And we
Yes.
keep talking, I don't think the numbers have really, I think we've had 400,000 people in poverty since 1970. I'm not sure we've really moved the needle on that total number. What moves is the bottom
We've had
number.
between 3 and 40,000 for all of your adult life.
Yeah, so the denominator keeps moving up and down, so the percentages change, but the actual people in poverty has stayed the same. And I'm not sure there are many cities in the United States that have actually solved the problem. Many of them push people out, and that's how they make their numbers look better.
That is correct.
Yeah, so I mean, we really need to tackle it 50,000 at a time. But if you're saying the administration is going to provide us with that plan,
We can do that. Let me just start with, think about this. This is much bigger than this room. The United States of America has a minimum wage that has less spending power than the minimum wage of 1963 had. $1.25 in 1963 had more spending power than $7.85 has today. So that's the fundamental baseline. We as a nation do not choose to reward people for doing work.
okay. All right, so I'll look forward to that plan. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. There appears to be no additional questions for this panel. I want to thank you all very much. And next up, we will have public property.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Sir.